where he shouldn't have found it, and giving back to his family and bringing them along with him. I don't know. You can disagree.
No, I mean, look, I think that you'd lose a lot, okay? I think that's fair to say, including, by the way, the next 4 of Nolan's movies.
Yes.
So, to return, right.
Yes, yes.
I think that a lot of what we learn from Genesis is how to behave and how not to behave. And a lot of what Genesis teaches is that if you behave like the people in this book, if that's how your family operates, right, with deceit and backstabbing and choosing one child over the other, and all of these terrible traits that we would never want in our own family, you end up alone in a coffin in Egypt.
Right.
Right? So part of it is how do we redeem ourselves, and part of it is how do we grow up as a people, right? How do we grow up? And Genesis is how we learn about our forefathers and foremothers, and we learn our identity. And in many ways, I think it's very much like a preamble to the document, right? It's a really important preamble to the document that, you know, how we function as a people.
And it's a good reminder that people weren't any better then than they are now. Seriously, I mean, when you talk about families, I mean, everybody talks about families and it emphasizes family. Well, the families in Genesis, I mean, Adam and Eve, and they have 2 kids, Cain and Abel. One tries to kill the other. And Abraham and Sarah have 2 kids. One he throws out of the house, the other he takes up to a mountain to die. These are not happy families. And nobody does better, except, as Rabbi Brous just pointed out, at the end, there's some redemption and healing. So it's both powerful and endlessly interpretable.
I believe that part of what Genesis offers us is stories of moral failure so that we learn what to do after moral failure. So in other words, we're not supposed to model our behavior after the behavior of these characters, but rather to recognize in them our own failures and to see how they keep living even after coming down from the mountain where they were willing to make the biggest mistake of a person's life. And even still, they have to wake up the next morning and start life again. And so I think it's not that we're supposed to try to be like Abraham in the moment where he makes the decision to take his son up the mountain, but rather that we see the failure of Abraham, recognize it in our own, and then take steps the next morning after our own mistakes as well.
You say in the movie, we're not creating anything. There was a moment where you're saying, or is it you saying it or somebody saying it? I think it was you in the narration. Do you really think that that's true? I think that there are so many things being created now and so much trouble in the world at the same time, and that in some way it echoes on a different level the stories that we're talking about.
What I'm talking about specifically there is the economy. And so I think that we get in trouble as a country when we don't focus on creation and manufacturing, when we focus on swapping derivatives, when we focus on emptiness, on just pushing paper. The emptiness actually comes to roost, and we end up with emptiness. And that's what I think is one of the morals of Genesis. And it might be that I was born and raised in Chicago, and I believe in people putting in a hard day of work, and I believe in these great values I grew up with, but I don't see. Everybody grows up wanting to be a filmmaker or wanting to be an investment banker or wanting to be, and at the end of the day, we have to think to ourselves, what are we actually creating as a society? And the creativity is part of it, but part of it is that we have to actually make stuff, right? We have to show people what it is that we're making. And we lose transparency when we stop making stuff and we start selling only the rights to the things that other people make. That's what I'm talking about when I say that we stop creating.
So I picking up on that, there was a book that came out in the 60s or 70s by Daniel Bell, the sociologist, called The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism. And it was about the fact that capitalism depends on values that capitalism itself destroys. And what he meant is that capitalism depends on thrift and families and hard work and all those things. But if you discover you can make a lot of money by not working very hard, or by exploiting someone else, capitalism rewards that even as it erodes capitalism itself. And what you hear on the right and the left in different ways is we need to reassert fundamental values in order to make the economic system that we believe in work the way it's supposed to work, even though it has a tendency to tear away at those very values. And it's something that America has to come to grips with. And by the way, I think the right and the left both have pieces of the values that we're missing, but the two of them have to, and you heard it from the people in the film. One of the things that was so nice about the film was, yes, it was perhaps over presidentially generous to one candidate, but who was the only candidate in the film. But you heard a variety of voices seriously across the political spectrum interpreting Genesis as a value book in very different ways, which was great.
Yeah.
So just as an explanation, when I brought Governor Huckabee into the movie, he was the host of Huckabee, the show on Fox News Channel. And actually, the executive producer of the film, Amy Lumet, she saw the first 10 minutes of the movie, and she asked me if you could get one more interview, who would it be? So the whole movie was basically done. She watched the 10 minutes that we screened for several people, and without a doubt, I knew the wish list off the top of my head at this point. And the first name that I said to her was Mike Huckabee, because I knew who she knew, but I also knew that this is somebody with a pastoral background who I think would want to be part of the project. And the day that he announced that he was leaving Fox News, I was supposed to be on Fox News 10 days later on his show.
Yeah.
So his running for president.
Hurt the movie.
Hurt the
It hurt the movie, basically.
It brings a lot of attention to the movie. That certainly does.
Gives you another audience.
Right. But we missed the platform, and I'll always be grateful, though, that I sent the email to his producer 6 hours later. I had an email back from him saying that he would be in the movie, and the reason that we couldn't have a conversation was because he was flying to Jerusalem at that time to meet with the 3 families of the boys that were kidnapped.
Oh, really?
And it was amazing. It was amazing. And he's an amazing person in person, and I'm sure all the candidates are. That's the truth, is that when you sit with any of the people in the movie and spend the day with them, I can tell you that the blessing of the movie are the people that I've been introduced to along the way. It's an amazing, amazing thing to think that I have sat with rabbis and presidential candidates and Alan Dershowitz, and I grew up in Chicago, and if you'd asked me what the inside of the Archdiocese looks like, I would not have told you that it's a medieval castle just situated in the middle of the downtown area. But that's the truth. You walk through the hallways and it's lit by candlelight. And I went to the Rebbe of Creationism, Ken Ham, and that was I'd never been to Kentucky before, and it was an amazing experience. And so I bring that experience to Jews everywhere who probably will never go to Kentucky and not be at the Creation Museum. So I did it for all of you.
Welcome to journalism. It's the wonder of getting to meet people that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance. I was particularly taken by the priest in the shelter, and by the families who spoke to you there, because I think that it's the fact that he chooses to live that life. It's not just a mitzvah day. It's actually spending his life there. And I thought that in some ways that may have been a part of the message of the film as well, is to embrace this as the messages of the Bible as your life. I don't know. And the family that was talking with their child there in the stroller, it was very moving, I thought.
But one of the things that always, I think we all feel as religious people that's upsetting is that non-religious people have no idea how much good, disinterested good just because God tells you have to go to Haiti and rebuild houses for 20 years, people do. And so, unfortunately, as is true of many things, but it's certainly true of religion, the evils that religion wreaks on the world are always on the front page, and this guy would never be known, were it not Duffy, right? Wasn't that his name? The Franciscan would never be known if it weren't for the movie. And he's been doing this it's amazing.
Yeah. Rabbi Brous, that's a lot of the calling that you try to bring to, I think the social action that you try to bring to your congregation as well is to try and go out into the community and not just stay in the synagogue or the setting. And I wondered if you had anything to add on that topic.
Yeah, it is interesting. Most of the people who feel a sense of connection to Genesis, who you interviewed, are in rooms with a lot of books behind them. And most of the people who feel really disconnected are out on the street living life. And then this break, except for this guy, Ham, right? Except for Ken Ham, because he builds this museum out in the world. But and then this priest breaks that mold, and he really his Torah will not live in a room with a lot of books, but rather, and not in the sanctuary, not on the bima. His Torah lives out on the street, and I was very moved also by that journey that you took us in. I mean, it's in some ways it's an implied critique of the rest of us, who are being interviewed with books behind our heads, which is, I don't know if you meant that, but I take that seriously, and we all should actually. I mean, if the Torah we're preaching makes people feel really good while they're sitting in the seats in their comfortable pews in our sanctuaries, then it does nothing but entertain us. And what that priest is actually doing is showing us what it means when Torah comes alive.
When I went to interview Father Duffy in Kensington, it was the only time in the movie where I felt in danger, right? So a cab pulled up, dropped us off. I gave him money. He didn't give me change. He slammed the door and drove away. And we were left on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases full of camera equipment with stickers all over it that said, "Media, please handle fragile." And with all of these people in the community standing around us, and I was dressed in a suit and tie, and I stuck out, for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. And Father Duffy came out, and literally the sea parted for him. He walked out, and all of these people, immediately you felt reverence, and you felt respect, and I felt safe. And he took us into the building, and he said, "We're not going to want to do the interview here." Just like all of the other subjects in the movie, he said, "You're not going to want to do the interview here. Let's do it upstairs in the sanctuary." And we walked up into the sanctuary. We carried all the suitcases upstairs, which is what I remember, right? In these rickety steps, very narrow path. And we end up in the sanctuary, which is absolutely silent. And there's probably 8 folding chairs in the room. And there's an altar, and there's a crucifix, and Father Duffy says, "This is much better for you, isn't it?" And the sound guy immediately said, "This is perfect. Thank you very much." And I said, "This is awful. This is awful, because if we do the interview in here, nobody will see what I just saw."
Yeah.
Right? And after I did that interview, I'll never forget. We started the interview, and Josh, the cinematographer, we did the first shot, the first 5 minutes or whatever, and he turned to the sound guy. And he said, "How does it sound to you?" And he said, "It sounds like we're in a homeless shelter right underneath the subway." I thought to myself, great. And then every phase of the movie, the next creative, always, that was their first question is, why did I pick that location? Mm-hmm. But just think how different the movie would be if I had chosen the sanctuary, mm-hmm. right? And if everybody's instinct was to put me in an office or away from action. And the truth is, I did the LA interviews before I went out into the world and started to do other interviews. And I learned along the way. The movie had a creative curve in and of itself. And that's the truth, is I see the movie, and all of you see 75-minute movie, and I see the 40 hours of movie that I shot, right? And so I see Rabbi Brous talking about Ezer Kenegdo, that did not make the movie. And I see Rabbi Wolpe talking about the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia and how America has a special relationship to the Bible, and that didn't make the movie. And I could talk about great quotes from every single person in the movie that did not make the movie.
We all got cut for Huckabee.
Right. That's right. That's right.
It's okay.
No. Rabbi Wolpe, you wanted to...
I was just going to say, you can, next time, for Exodus, shoot in the board meetings, and you'll see what the synagogue, like you'll see the guts of the synagogue.
You'll see the Israelites.
In a beautiful way.
I want to take some questions from the audience. There's one in the back there.
Given what Rabbi Brous was talking about in terms of the relationships and the tension that
No, the truth is there was just an overwhelming amount of footage. And there had to be, we started screening it little by little for small groups. And we could see at what point people started to lose it. There was a lack of attention at a certain point. And it just seemed to us that this point was the sweet spot for where the movie should be. So it covers 10 passages right now, and the DVD is set up so that there's an adult education curriculum that goes along with it so that you can skip and rabbis and pastors can teach it. And we're getting that ready for when Sefer Breshit starts again in the fall. But at some point, we had to just say, this is the movie. These are the passages. These are the best topics that we have. And we went with it.
More questions? There's one right there.
Nolan, I want to say as well. You're interested in making movies about absolutely everything. So, what themes are going to be touched upon?
What scenes are going to be on in Roadmap Exodus?
Themes, right. Themes. So the central idea of Roadmap Exodus at this point, right, is, and again, we're trying to get there. So we're not there just yet, right? But the basic premise is to follow, I'm a grandchild of 4 survivors of the Shoah, right? So my family went through Exodus. So the idea is to start with an Exodus story, to start with a redemption of sorts out of the camps, and to show what it means to live in the 21st century in a state of Exodus where we are blessed to live in the United States and have a state of Israel, and we're blessed to live in the year 2015, and what that means to have moved from a 1939 reality as a Jew living in the world, and to be honest, as a Christian living in the world as well. One of the places that I went to is called Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry, and it was the only place, synagogue or church, right, that I walked into, where I walked into the boardroom, and there was a 6-foot tall, I believe, portrait of Theodore Herzl on the wall. And I had these experiences over and over again. I had these experiences where I would listen to pastors or directors of these churches talk about Israel, and I would say to myself, I want to be at their Yom Kippur sermon. That's the sermon I want to hear. Right, and so I think that we're ripe for that kind of discussion, especially because I think that it makes Jews far more uncomfortable than it makes evangelical leaders, right? To hear their love of Israel, and to hear sometimes that their love of Israel outfirms our love of Israel, right? That I hear their leaders, and I want to listen to their leaders, and I want to be part of their groups, and I hear our leaders, and sometimes I walk away shaking my head, and I think that that's a little bit of what I want to touch in Roadmap Exodus, and we'll see. It depends a lot about screenings and about selling DVDs. And don't worry, they're going to be available for everybody here in this room.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. Sir?
Tell us about Amy Lumet. Is she from the Jewish theatrical family, Baruch Lumet, Sidney Lumet?
She's Sidney Lumet's daughter.
Sidney Lumet's daughter.
Yeah.
That was a quick question.
Great
We can take one more. There in the back. Oh. It's okay. It's okay. Go ahead, please.
Well, let's hear the 2 questions.
Yeah,
we'll see which
have
one's
2.
better.
We'll take 2. Go ahead. You started, please.
Talk about that needs to be done better.
So is that a yes or no question?
I feel like I'm in the Coliseum, like I should give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on humanity. I think it's super complicated. It's super complicated, right? The 20th century saw two literally unfathomable wars filled with atrocities that we still today can't fully imagine. And we saw the greatest miracle the world has seen in 2,000 years, right? An autonomous Jewish state. And I would say, I know Rabbi Wolpe is one of his favorite characters in world history is from the 20th century, Churchill. You have amazing, amazing people that lived in the 20th century. You have amazing acts. You have amazing people that stood for causes. Progress was made. And in spite of all that progress, right? I mean, Germany was one of the most successful societies in the history of the world. Right at the outset of the Shoah, you have this duality that I think is true in Genesis, and I think is true all the way until today. Is that people are capable of the greatest good, and people are capable of the worst evil imaginable, and it's up for us to pick the path that we want to travel.
And I'm going to let the other rabbis comment. Nothing? Very well said, yeah. Okay.
I agree. I think it's very well said. I still think that on balance, I would come down on the side of progress.
Thank you.
And the reason that I would is, first of all, in terms of the conquest of disease, there are many diseases that used to ravage humanity that have been completely or virtually eliminated. Poverty, hunger, we may not realize this, child hunger and other hunger obviously has not been eliminated, but there's been tremendous progress. A lot fewer children are hungry today than they were even 10 years ago. If you read Steven Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, and you see the curve of violence throughout history, despite the fact that there were these horrible wars in the 20th century, there's a clear and steady decline. When we're outraged by beheadings in ISIS, a few hundred years ago, no one would be outraged by that. When you insult someone, a few hundred years ago, everybody would, even the most civilized circles, an insult was avenged by a duel. So we don't realize how violent and how awful society was in the Middle Ages, which was a world ruled by like 17 and 18-year-old kings, because by 35 or 40 they were all dead. And so I think that we tend to take all the progress for granted and see the evil, but in fact I think humankind has in many ways made tremendous, tremendous progress, and we should be very grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you for putting context or facts.
I think Rabbi Brous wants to say something, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can finish your sentence if it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I want to. So my point here is that what I was seeing in this movie was sort of what I was missing, and I've been in sales for all my life, okay? And the point I think was trying to get people to study Genesis, to go back into it, to sort of sell them on let's go back into this. And for me, this was a half-empty sort of message. I didn't see enough of the half full. Like, look how much, because of people like the people that you've shown, and others that we don't even know about, and the progress, we made so much progress.
So
now let's continue that. Anyway.
Let's let them finish, and then I think we have to move on.
Oh, I don't want the last word, but you should have the last word. But I do want to say, I think you lay out so beautifully what the progress of humankind looks like, and you're absolutely right. And yet that's precisely what's so devastating about what happens now. It's once your child becomes a sophisticated human being in the world and has language, you're even more angry when she uses violence instead of uses her words, right? And so because we have the capacity to put people on the moon and to build satellites and to eradicate illnesses, it's even more devastating when we don't muster the collective human will to actually eradicate all of the illness. I mean, there's still children who die from mosquito bites because they don't have a $1 mosquito net. So what does that mean? What does that say about us as human beings? So in many cases, it's the success of technology and the failure of will that I see in this moment, and I think that's what you were saying so beautifully. It's really a mixed bag. We have the capacity to do incredible good, which makes it even more devastating when we don't utilize it. And I think that's the challenge facing the 21st century is really, are we going to be able to muster the will to match our incredible capacity for good in the world?
And I'll let you finish.
So,
Amen. Amen.
So I just wanted to finish by saying a couple of things. First of all, thank you to Rabbi Wolpe and Rabbi Brous, and thank you to Sinai Temple and to Ikar. And thank you to everybody here for coming, and everybody who's going to be watching on YouTube and whatnot. And I also wanted to say that I hope that this is not the end of a conversation, Ron. I see this as the beginning of a conversation, right? And I get countless emails from people after they watch the DVD across the country that say, we got this email that was mind-blowing. I've been raised in Manhattan, right, in an interfaith family. I was bat mitzvahed. I never opened the Torah before, and since I saw your movie, I've read a chapter of Genesis every day. And just to think that I didn't tell people to do good, I tried to show the good. I talk about the bad and I try to show the good. And I hope that the movie really accomplishes that. And I hope that what we really hope is that when people come, right, and this will be the last cell tonight, is that we're going to stay behind. David Stern, my producing partner, is here. He can raise his hand and acknowledge himself since he's never acknowledged. We're going to be selling DVDs, and what I'd like for everybody in the room to do is I'd like for everybody to buy a DVD and not keep it. I'd like for everybody to buy a DVD and send it to a friend who doesn't live in Los Angeles and tell them to watch the film, right? Because we're trying to spread the message around, and the truth is that we have the greatest connections here in Los Angeles, which is why we have incredible rabbis and synagogues that sponsor the film, and we're trying to broaden out, and the only way we can build such a grassroots operation is by broadening out. And so all of you are my emissaries and my salespeople, and where I fall short, I hope that you can pick up the slack. So I appreciate everybody's time, and talk soon.